Hello, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can indeed. How are you?
Very well. How are you?
I'm excellent.
Oh,
Quite windy. Excellent. I know, that's exciting, isn't it? Quite windy up here at the moment.
Is it?
Yeah, that's a bit boring, isn't it, Daniel? But I'll tell you anyway.
It's like, give us a bit of context. I can imagine your circumstances over there.
Yeah, we put up a polytunnel in the garden about 3 days ago, and it's at risk of being blown away on day 3.
Huh.
This is farming in Scotland.
Well, I can actually relate to that, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you probably, I don't know if you know the story of my tents when I first started here.
No,
You don't? Okay.
no, I don't. I haven't heard that.
Yeah, my tents.
I was going to say, you've got to tell me now. You can't just leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually find it. I think it is, because I think actually this is on my thing.
How's your day been today?
It's been quite good actually, just varied. If I go back in time, yes, there we go. There we go. Give me a second. And I'm going to share my screen.
This is classed as a temporary shelter. Very sturdy temporary shelter.
So we're talking 2 years ago now. This is
Okay.
actually,
And of course, this is classed as a temporary shelter as well.
Oh no.
that was my first production facility.
That must have been gutting.
This is what I would call a business interruption.
I had the tanks for collecting rainwater and everything.
This is what's left of
Yeah.
my temporary shelter.
And this is where basically I decided to start making compost thermometers and sort of go back to composting a bit later. So yeah, that's my experience with winds and those those tents I set up in November 2019, and then the first days of either the last days of December or the first days of January, 1 tent out of 3 was destroyed, and then the first days of February, the 2 remaining tents got destroyed.
Oh, rubbish. That's not good, is it?
Rubbish tents, yeah.
Yeah. Is that where you still are? Is that on the same site?
This is the same farm.
Yeah. Okay.
This is the same farm. I'm just going to send the link to this meeting to Adam. Give me a second. What is this? Pretty sure he's got it in his inbox somewhere. With me. Send. Okay, fine. Yeah, we're still on the same farm. It's just that basically we moved to a building, with that actually uses bricks and a roof. So that's the building which is now known as Scrapboard. So we've moved from having a very windy structure to having rats as companionship. So that's basically the change.
Yeah. There's always compromises.
Oh yeah. Scruffy the rat has been with us ever since, and you get a whole host, from very scruffy rats, like they're not very healthy looking, to rats which basically look like beavers, so because there's the size of the beaver. Although last week I actually had a little rat companion here in the lab because it was raining, it was miserable, and I found this thing curled up outside my door, and it was a baby rat. Wouldn't run away from me. It was just soaking wet and cold. So I put it in a box. There's plenty of dangers outside, with cats and everything. So it stayed in the box for 3 hours, and suddenly just started moving again. Had some bread, had a drink of water, and started running off. So I just let it out. So yeah, rats, because they're always here. They're gonna be here. They're gonna be here, after we're long gone. So
yeah, I'd say so. So the farm that you're on, was that a composting facility before you guys came? Then was that one of the reasons why you came there?
Yeah, this is. I was speaking to the green waste composting industry for 2 years before I started on this farm.
Mm-hmm.
And back in 2019, I reached out to then the president of the Organics Recycling Group, which was Jeremy Jacobs. He's retired now. And I said to him, I'm building this opportunity that the green waste industry could just take on and make money with, but it seems to be hard to get across the message when they've got this business model and they basically just they act like they're a landfill, and so they get paid for the green waste and they're not interested in anything else. And if they if they make clean material, they can sell it and that's it. But you must know some people who would be interested. So he said, give me an email and I will basically forward it to 5 contacts I think would be interested. So one of them was Robert Benford. And it just happened that he, this place is 20 minutes away from where I live. And that's why we're here. And it's a green waste site, it turns over, quite a few tons of green waste material. So we've got first pick. We can do whatever we want with it. Today, Adam went and checked out one of the older wood chip piles because they've got a biomass business as well, and found some stuff the same way as Niels found. So last year, found some good fungi just basically sitting in a pile. And it doesn't have to be 14. It doesn't have to be 14 years old to have a good fungi in it.
How old was that stuff?
Somewhere between 2 and 5 years old, basically. We don't know exactly what, because it's like they've got a piece of concrete and they just put wood chip on it, and then they take wood chip from it, but they never empty the piece of concrete. And so the material in the corner has been there for most likely close to 5 to 6 years.
Okay.
So there's probably places like that around the country somewhere.
Yeah, there's bound to be a lot, aren't there?
Mm. So it's good for fungi. This stuff is definitely good for fungi. If we want to, effectively move the succession, there is that opportunity. It's about finding these things, and maybe we'll be able to get something done quicker.
Yeah, it's a lot of it. I think is unfortunate. Like there was a pile close to us where I thought, I could get some really good old wood chip from, but unfortunately, it was all mixed in with old carpet. Which you just think, that's not ideal. I suppose that would rot down eventually, but it's just a shame when an opportunity you think could be good, but just because of contamination, it's just then all makes it so much more difficult. But then I suppose, it is what it is, isn't it?
Well, this is why we want to have a production facility rather than an inspection facility.
Yeah.
It's fine if you find it from time to time, but if you don't have any control over it, it's imagine basically the synthetics fertilizer industry, works on the principle that they're going to find deposits of something and just basically ship it as it is.
Yeah.
you know, they still have to mine phosphorus and they still have to refine it. So it's always going to be like that.
Mm.
Today also I heard that another thing preventing people from using green waste compost, and that is potentially too high amount of of potassium in it. So that is adding to my list.
Why would that be an issue?
I don't yet know. I've heard that, but I don't yet know. It's something to do with green waste compost and how they process it, but I would need to sort of find the source of that. I sent an email to Jenny Grant, who's the head of organic recycling group, see if she's got some data on it. I've asked Robert, and he's going to be able to check, you know, the results of the testing of his compost. We'll see. Maybe we can get down to the bottom of this. I've got some ideas. I mean, between me and Adam, we've already got some ideas what to do with it, but just wanted to see.
The issue seems to be when you, if you want to grow, like obviously peat's being made illegal, so people are going to have to start growing in something else, some other substrate in like nurseries. And it seems that when, for most plants anyway, when you exceed 20% compost in the substrate, the potassium is too high and it ends up locking out calcium.
Okay.
But obviously that's not going to be an issue with field scale agriculture because, you know, we got our substrate out there.
Yeah.
It's pretty lacking.
If you had good biology, that the biology would kind of deal with that rather than being a non-biological kind of chemical-based system.
I mean, this is said a lot, but with my experience and with Gareth's experience today, with Jeremy from Builder Soil over in the States, this is a common thing that keeps occurring. So,
but this is for horticulture, where basically
that's for horticulture.
You're looking basically at having a substrate. You know, like they're trying to replace peat, and so you know it's just basically something that would be an inert substrate. And actually, I asked about the current situation with cocoa coir or coir, however they call it, and he said that the material is cheap, but shipping right now made it, you know, expensive again. So it's like an open problem right now again in the UK.
Because we're finding that as well. We're trying to get an organic sort of potting and growing compost for the market garden, and we're having to use this coconut coir stuff because, but it just makes you wonder. Well, is that sustainable?
Well, yeah, I mean, because you've got a lot of shipping costs in terms of carbon. We're just actually also collaborating, or we're basically with these clients. They've got a project where they're looking for a sort of living potting mix for their nursery, woodland nursery. And so, you know, they're experimenting with, you know, 3 different methods of composting themselves, and they're looking to make it into a substrate for that. So, you know, there's many people working on it. You know, the idea is so like we're running through my head, had even to do with potassium solubilizing bacteria that could be sort of like, you know, introduced to the compost. Maybe they could sort of pick it out and then you sort of wash it off. I don't know what the answer is going to be. It's experimentation, right?
For you, Phil, I'm guessing you're trying to use the coconut fiber for the starts, right?
Yeah.
Well, a good mature compost is going to be okay for starts because most of the energy they're drawing from is within the seed itself. They're not actually pulling anything from the outside environment. It's when they become older in the vegetative phase, they generally start to show signs then. So you'd probably be all right with compost just for starts as long as it's mature compost. It's not got like heinous amounts of fresh wood in it. But so that should be right.
Okay.
It's for people that are trying to grow on plants in like a pot environment. And they're trying to, you know, say grow a tomato in a pot for its whole life. Then you're really going to run into problems then. But for starting your seedlings and stuff, you should be fine.
Because another thing we were thinking, because the idea, this is all new to us as well, this organic market garden thing. So we were wanting to do kind of in the Richard Perkins style, just top dress it with loads of compost, but we're just a bit nervous at this stage, especially that mushroom compost, because I think it's so it's still almost hot, for want of a better word. There's still a lot of N in it. So I think this year we might just kind of gently mix it in with the soil just to try and dilute that, and then possibly get some better stuff for next year and do your sort of nemalode things and when we've got a bit more time. But because we tried planting some seeds directly into that, and it's not been overly successful just yet. So that's just made us.
I mean, I was reading an article today, which kind of, you know, sort of says it all. Which one was that? I'm going to dig it up. The sentence basically of the article is, you know, if you basically are adding a lot of nitrogen in whatever form into the soil, then microbes need carbon from somewhere to balance it out, and so they just will rub it off from anywhere, and you know, then you've got a you know, a situation where they will take it from stable organic matter and, you know, whatever they can get basically, and they just, microbes will be just growing, nothing else.
Okay.
Or bacteria for that matter.
Yeah, we've got loads of that. But no, I mean, it's a bit of an experiment, and no, I'm sure we'll get there. But it's yeah, you never just, it's like anything at the start, you're never just sure exactly the best way, and obviously, hopefully, with time comes a bit of experience. So.
So you're setting up a market garden right now? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, like an organic CSA. Is just, not that that's a very British thing, but yeah. So we'd just, as a little side venture on the farm, the idea would be that if we can get the organic CSA set up, then for vegetables, then hopefully we could move to like a meat CSA as well. For the animals, because I don't know, if people buy a vegetable CSA, they'd probably be quite interested in a meat CSA. And when you look at the figures of a farm our size, I mean, we're not big, but what are we, about 320 acres? I think we'll only need maybe 200 people to sort of.
So how many animals have you got on there already?
So at the moment we've got deer and sheep. And next we'll be getting chickens, mainly for eggs, but we'll do some broilers, pigs, and then eventually cows is the plan. But that's not going to happen in 10 minutes.
No, I've got a friend around the corner actually. He's on 30 acres and he's got what, 15, 20 heads of cattle, some pigs, and you know, he basically just, you know, sends them off to an abattoir, and then he gets a freezer full. And then he goes to the market with it. So, you know, there's very many different ways you could go about that.
And I think, I don't know, it might just be that whenever you sort of do what we're doing and have an interest in, I suppose, nutrient cycling, soil food web, food miles, all that sort of stuff, you maybe start reading and speaking to more people that are interested in the same thing. But I genuinely do think there's an element of interest from the public, and that is growing. And I think it's potentially the next 5 to 10 years could see some shifts in mainstream thinking. What do you think?
Well, in terms of what, like people growing themselves, or just the trend is growing?
No, just in terms of looking more at regenerative agriculture and realizing that conventional isn't necessarily the way forward. Maybe looking as well at food miles a little bit, climate change impact on the environment.
If you approach it as an experiment, as with everything, you know, with the CSA, and see basically what works in your area, because obviously there's going to be some people who, you know, might want to help, but then there's going to be people who just want to have a box, right? But I guess, you know, if you do that, if you do pull it off, then you actually help with education, right? So you would be one of the people actually pushing this forward. Yeah,
no, that's a big hope in a way. I think I'll end up being hated by conventional agriculture.
Why? Why do you think that would happen?
Because I think the more you sort of go down our route, the more you see how wrong that other route is. And yeah, obviously, when you always want to promote something as this is good for this reason rather than slandering the other way. But I think some people will just, I don't know. Well, you see how big agriculture and the chemical companies, and it's all, I mean, they're greenwashing a lot of their products and saying how sort of carbon friendly some of their chemicals and all this sort of stuff is, and it's just miseducation and misinformation, I should say, in my view. I don't know a lot of it because it's unnecessary in the first place.
I think just treat it as a game as they're treating it, because, you know, in the end, basically, these are very big companies, very established companies with people who go to work. And, you know, they look at it from the perspective of, you know, we've got to keep bringing money in so that everybody gets paid, you know, and some of them, you know, maybe are more ambitious than the others, you know, in terms of like individual people. Most of these people, you know, I worked in the oil and gas industry. I didn't come across evil people. I just came across people who just live their lives and just want to come to work, you know, do their job and get paid. They're not interested in anything else. So this is where my, you know, attitude of, you know, not necessarily sort of finding you know, evil in these places. It's just basically, this is the status quo. This is how it works right now. You're building something new. Don't think that you have to take on, you know, like and change everything all at once. It doesn't happen like that. There's two things to keep in mind. One is basically making sure that the public is educated about, you know, the alternatives and not miseducated. Because if the game is being played, you know, with all sorts of tools, including, you know, greenwashing and maybe some misinformation, then all you can do is basically just show and tell, and you're perfectly positioned for that. So the more stories like that, you know, penetrate the individual bubbles of, you know, people in the society, then the better. And there's more and more stories like that. So don't fret. You know, I think you know, it's the whole momentum is building, and it's kind of like a completely new wave of movement towards organic that is really building up steam right now. It's something that, you know, was a lost fight, you know, in the 50s, but right now it's completely put on its head, and you can see that this is really building up.
Yeah, I think almost organic isn't quite enough, I don't think.
It doesn't matter how you call it.
But at least it's something, and it's on that.
It doesn't matter how you call it, Phil. I'm only using. I keep reminding people that I keep using the word organic is because the rest of the society understands organic as the alternative to chemical. That's all. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Got you.
Judith?
I wouldn't worry, Phil, because I think I wouldn't go seeking a battle with conventional.
No, of course not.
Keep your head down and do what you believe to be right. And I would agree with you. I think you are right. But I would be open to educating and sort of engaging with local groups, local people, local communities, even schools to some extent, and simply sort of present it as an alternative to what some other people are saying, you know. And a lot of life is a choice thing. A lot of life is people, you know, they think one way is right because that's all they've ever heard. They haven't heard the other part of the other side of the discussion, the other side of the debate. And I think you just have to open their eyes and open their ears to another way of doing things. And I also don't think you should ever think you'll convert all of them or even any of them. No. I think there will be people who engage with it and get it and then are actually motivated to do something about it. Now, whether that be to come and help you or come and become one of your customers, or whether it be to go home and grow some of their own, does it matter?
No, exactly.
The key thing is that you can make a living out of this. And if you can spread the word, so to speak, as part of that, that's really important as well. Or if it's important to you, then that's, you know, that's a great thing.
Yeah. We'll see where it ends up. But no, I'm really excited about it in terms of my farming kind of career, for want of a better word. This whole soil food web thing and for want of a better phrase has really reinvigorated my interest in farming, and I do a lot more reading now and a lot more sort of trials and things like that, just because I think, well, we need to change. Even me trying something on a few acres, yeah, that's maybe worthwhile.
I've just basically found something. I'm going to put it in the chat. Years ago, I used to do a permaculture podcast, and one of the people I met was Chris Walsh. He runs the Kindling Trust. I'm going to share my screen. It's going to be easier. And what he did, he basically connected the community agriculture model with institutions. And so he's basically around Manchester, and I believe that he's actually managed to get a deal with restaurants in Manchester Uni and places like that, where basically, you know, he actually managed to secure good prices for the growers, and basically that allowed the restaurants to get good quality food. And the growers had the security that, you know, in case of a bad harvest, they're still actually getting paid. And you're actually getting straight, you know, you're not just basically speaking with individual people, then your profile actually is higher as well. And so this is something for you to keep in mind. Depends how far you are, you know, from institutions like this. Mm-hmm. But there are options other than CSAs in this country that actually already, you know, have been demonstrated to work.
Cool.
I think ultimately the change isn't going to come from convincing people. It's going to come from rendering every other system obsolete, financially anyway, and sequestering carbon at the same time. If we can do that, there won't be any convincing needing to be done, because you want to make money or you don't.
Yeah,
that's going to be what it comes down to, right? And that's usually the biggest agent of convincing people that you can get. So as long as we can provide a system that works, then we'll be winning. At the moment, that system doesn't seem to exist, even with Elaine's blessings.
Yeah, I know. I think you're exactly right with that. It's just, and especially getting one that fits the UK.
Yeah.
Which I suppose, in a way, our temperate climate is so forgiving in many ways. It's not the sort of, I don't know, the brittle environments that you find in Australia and some of America, stuff like that you see real benefits with some of the stuff.
Forgiving for longer, stuff. Right? For a bit longer.
Yeah, I know. yeah. The road doesn't go on forever, though, does it?
That's it.
Yeah, because in America, well, a lot of John Kemp stuff he says, I mean, there was really productive sort of American farmland on the Great Plains, stuff like that, just that all of a sudden in the mid 2010s, just yield went off a cliff and it just gave up. And I suppose in the UK, we're maybe 10 years behind them in terms of our climate's a bit more forgiving. We maybe didn't use the same level of agrochemicals and stuff, but at some point, especially in Lincolnshire, the east of England, some of that ground's going to start giving up, isn't it?
Yeah, it already has. Yeah.
I think in farming there are a lot of challenges, and a lot of people aren't standing back far enough. You know, I mean, livestock farming, we've had trouble with wormer resistance, animal health, lameness, cobalt deficiencies, copper deficiencies, all sorts of other things. Just things not being right, and mineral imbalances kind of around lambing time and calving time, and that we just didn't experience 10 and 15 years ago. And you kind of hit it one year and you don't see it for a couple of years, and then it comes back and you go, you know, I thought that was a one-off. And I think if if we're honest with ourselves and we stand back and we look at this, I think you have to say there's something not right, and it is getting worse. And I mean, I don't know anything much about cropping or arable or any of that kind of stuff, but I just can't imagine that they're not suffering similar weird things going on and challenges and things just not performing the way they maybe did previously.
And humans too.
Pardon?
Yeah.
And humans.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think the human, you know, if we could be producing food regeneratively and the British public eating a better diet, I think the NHS could cope, because once it caught up, the need for the NHS services would surely drop because there would be less diabetes, less heart conditions, less obesity, less cancer, less everything.
It's going to be a great opportunity for the government to slash the money to NHS again.
Oh, well, I mean, that's going to be a wee while, but I mean,
I wish that happens. I wish that happens, Judith. Seriously,
it's going to take decades, though. But it could and should happen.
Sure.
We can definitely dream. It's something that you know, this is why we exist. You know, we exist to want to solve these big problems. You know, we're here to want to help. You know, we want to see this whole thing get better.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not scared about the long-term future for regenerative farming and production, because I think we can make it work. We just need to find out how to make it work. And it's the transition that scares me, because we've got all that experimentation and all that learning to do meantime. And throughout that, we have to continue to exist as businesses.
What have you considered what because you had ideas for the size of experiment for this year? Have you sort of put more thought into it, what you're going to be doing, Judith?
Not completely yet. I went on a farm walk yesterday, and it's one of these farm visits where it's really good to have spoken to the farm workers. Because of my muscular dystrophy, I got a ride in a buggy round about the farm, because they went up to the trig point and roundabout and everywhere. So I got to hear, you know, all that had gone on in the last year. And basically it was a small estate. Well, no, it's quite a big estate with, say, the move to regenerative production is based on 4 farms on that estate. And the home farm, they basically tried to turn the whole thing from completely conventional to totally regenerative in 1 year. And you go, what? You know, just absolute madness.
Yeah, we're not ready to take a whole farm like that, no.
No, crazy, absolutely nuts. And they ended up with massive animal welfare problems, which they didn't talk about in public yesterday, but I heard all about because I was in the buggy with the stockman. And you just can't do that. You know, you have to learn a bit at a time. You can't take on that amount of change and complexity. I mean, the whole thing's very complex, but our son went with us as well, and I just said, you know, I learned more about what not to do there than what to do, but that's equally important. But that what not to do bit, when it goes wrong, that puts so many potential, you know, farmers who potentially might have changed, that puts them off, because you go to them in 2 years' time and say regenerative is the way to go, and they say, oh, well, look, Edgston did that 3 years ago, and look at what happened to their sheep and cattle that winter. That was a disaster. And they would watch it with a barge pole, and that's a really danger.
This is why we're so adamant to do small trials. And, you know, when we go out to farmers, you know, we say, it's like, don't ever, you know, I come to you with an idea of a trial, don't ever think that I'm going to be, you know, taking over your whole field. I'm not going to be taking your farm. I'm not going to be taking your field. I'm going to be taking a piece that you can lose.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And just basically, you know, I'm going to be doing everything I can for you not to lose it. But you basically, you know, like just consider it lost, you know, and just sort of, you know, keep it as an experiment. I don't think, yeah, there are people, you know, who are probably magicians who are experienced enough. You know, I'm thinking maybe, you know, Ben Taylor Davis, Jonathan Holmes, you know, Neil Scorfield, who knows? Maybe they're talented enough agronomists who can come in and steer that transition properly, right? But I don't think we have enough of these people around the country yet.
Nothing like it. And the other thing is, the communication has to be really, really good, because they can tell a farmer to do A, B, and C. But the farmer, unless they actually understand the concept behind it, they could go off and do G, H, and I, and not realizing that it could have a hugely detrimental effect to having done A, B, and C. And completely not only nullify what they've achieved, but actually undo any success they might have had that year.
Right.
And unless the people, I mean, we've not done a lot. We've done bits and pieces, but you know, I feel I've learned a lot, and but I still wouldn't. I mean, I'll pick a couple of fields. I mean, we only bought half the fertilizer we're going to need this spring, and it's gone up again. I'm going, well, so is there a way I can mitigate the damage done by fertilizer, or can I add something to the fertilizer, you know, or do something in those fields where the fertilizer rate is going to be lower? We can maybe sell some cattle early, sort of thing. But there's just, it's so difficult to work out how best to do things when you're changing it like that. But you've got to do something to start to learn, but you've got to do it on a small scale. But you were talking about earlier about samples and stuff. The fields where I've done my experiments, I want to do some soil sampling and stuff, but I don't know. So it'll depend what the weather's like in March. If it's really mild, it might be worth it. But if it's too early, don't know.
That's fine. We can extend the offer.
Because I've got 3 bits on the farm where I put, you know, biology on last year, JMS and stuff. But I'd like to see if that's made a difference. But March up here might be too early. If it turns cold, I mean, it's fantastic weather we've had just now. It's great, but you never know what's going to happen in the next 2 months.
Yeah, we've had snow in February.
Well, we had beast from the east in March, and that was pretty horrendous, whenever that was, 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah. I was going to ask you, Adam, last week I was asking about using, you know, conventional fertilizers, because I mean, we are looking at weaning not the whole farm, but fields off and trying to reduce the amount of fertilizer we're using. And I read stuff about using humic acids and stuff to try and counterbalance that. I just don't understand. They say use it, but I don't understand the process behind it, and I have no idea where to source it and what form it comes in. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, it's really hard to source it here. Your best supplier is BioAg Europe, who are basically distributing BioAg products, which are, it's humic acid sourced from a Cretaceous deposit in the States. So it comes from the States, unfortunately. Yeah, I can't find a good humic acid product that's made domestically.
Right. And how much am I putting on? I mean, there's humic acid in, I presume, in well-made compost.
If it's 2 to 3 years old, yeah, especially, you know, we'd prefer it to be 3 years old to get any kind of functional amount.
And how much, you know, if you were to make, say you were putting some biology on fields, like using a tanker with a dribble bar sort of idea, how much would you need to use to put on, you know?
Honestly, I'm not sure. You'd have to go to the work of Dr. Robert Faust. He's the best guy I've found.
Dr. Robert
Faust, Faust, and he lives in Oregon. He's put for 40 years of research into humic acid, fulvic acid, and composting.
It seems that everybody in the States basically doing that sort of stuff is from Oregon. Dr. Ingham worked in Oregon State University as well. And I found,
He used to live in Hawaii.
and I came across another guy doing mycorrhizal research, and he's from Oregon as well.
But yeah, it should improve the efficiency of the fertilizer, and it should tackle a bit of that thing that Daniel was talking about with the burning up of carbon rapidly due to the excess nitrogen in the system, because it's a very stable form of carbon in humic acid. The humic acid also contains fulvic acid, which is an acid-soluble fraction of the humic, or the humics, and that can be used to foliar feed and stuff. So it makes foliar applications a lot more efficient. It's a very light molecular weight, and it helps carry stuff into the plant.
I don't know. I don't know if the material that, because Judith, you just bought regular salt fertilizer, right?
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, I mean,
what is it? Ammonium nitrate, right? That's the thing.
yeah.
So the other thing, this is the involved bit. I'm thinking basically of ways, how people could improve the efficiency of the fertilizer that they spend so much money on. There's actually a book from like 1955 talking about composting using synthetic fertilizers as the high nitrogen addition to the pile. And I don't know if there's a way to maybe use some wood chips to actually dissolve a little bit of nitrogen fertilizer, but actually allow then the microbes, living in and around the wood chips to capture it, and then maybe even extract that as a foliar application or a cell application. I'm guessing right now. And this is
3, 4, 5-year-old wood chip, and this is fresh compost. Well, younger compost. So the wood chip does seem to have darkened the color of the water a lot more. Can't really see it in here.
Yeah.
But I'll leave it for a day and see. Obviously, really old piles of wood chips are going to be a good source of humic acid. And it's just finding them really, which obviously is time.
It's not just finding them, it's finding enough quantity to make a difference on a commercial farm scale. That's, and if we were to do composting and keep that, or some of that compost for 3 years, given what Glenn Mitchell's told me about cutting the fertilizer by a third, and a third, so by a year 4 you're out of it, you've kind of got yourself weaned off the fertilizer by the time the humic acid's ready to use.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing is that hopefully the biology is going to kick in sooner than you're trying to actually get these substances, right? Because humic acid basically is supposed to be a very large carbon molecule, something that basically these microbes produce as sort of like final metabolite of everything they can do with the carbon. And they just basically bunch it all up into an unrecognizable mess of a molecule. And that is simply used as a storage point.
A storage unit, really, isn't it, of carbon? Yeah.
Not even carbon, no. It's a pantry. It's basically, it's got so many exchange sites that it can do anything with any nutrients that you give it, right? So it can either suck up, heavy metals, or it can be a storage of nutrients for microbes for later. You can do, stuff like that, but it's basically.
So it's not just carbon, it's the fact that it's holding other mineral and other nutrients.
It's just helping the nutrients helping the efficiency of other nutrients. Yeah. Basically, that's what it's supposed to do. It's just basically, like if you imagine, that if you like in the simple, thing with cation exchange, right? All of the ions of the nutrients have to sit on something and then be exchanged for it.
Yeah, or get washed away.
The humic molecule basically is like this, the greatest surface you can come up with for cation exchange kind of thing. Yeah.
Seems to be important in pharmaceutical research now for leaky gut syndrome. So that probably is going to help cows who are suffering.
Leaky gut syndrome is an interesting one because it actually also has to do with sugar, and it's an overgrowth of microbes in the small intestine. I've read about that actually, and this is something that, you know, the small intestine is not really suited for a lot of microbial growth. But if basically, you know, we, for instance, eat too many sugary things, then the microbes from the large intestine take over the small intestine and they eat out the sort of protective layers, and that's basically where you have a leaky gut then, kind of thing. That's what I heard anyway. I'm not an expert.
Yeah, well, if you think what I'm doing with roots, I'm mixing them with sugar and it pulls stuff across that membrane, then, you know, it's a similar thing. That osmotic pressure in the stomach is going to rip apart the soft tissue, and other things like glyphosate are going to help that. And yeah, you start having
that makes
problems.
it sound quite horrendous. But yeah, I can understand.
Fun stuff. It's beyond my pay grade, unfortunately, but there's, you know, there's obviously a lot of people experimenting with that. You know, it's just we need to get, you know, this one thing sorted. You know, like you were saying to Phil, basically we just need to have a system that works, economical to use, and something that can be just simply applied, and that's it.
Yeah, if through, you know, I suppose sort of early adopters can fight their way through the transition thing and come up with a program that generally works, like of reducing your fertilizer by 30%, or 25% for 4 years, whatever it is, that would work, and a way of then supporting that biology to re-establish within the fields, that you could provide farmers with a program or a structure that, rather than have these guys like this farm yesterday just switching everything off and expecting everything to power up, it's just not feasible to think that that's going to happen in 12 months, and, you know, within one season.
And they wouldn't be, and I'm going to guess that they weren't doing any applications of biology onto it either.
No, but they did have Johnson Sue's round the back. But again, there must have been something wrong about it, because I only found that out at the end of the day, and they didn't show us them. And I was thinking, but why not? You know,
what, they weren't actually using them?
Well, they've got the Johnson Sue's up and running, but they didn't discuss them. I only discovered afterwards that they were there.
Maybe they weren't ready. Maybe they switched off the fertilization, but actually didn't use any microbes on it. You need to ask the question.
I think they only went into this this time last year. So the Johnson Sue's were only set up last year, so they haven't had a chance to use them yet. Yet they reseeded a field. Okay, it's got multi-species herbal ley kind of thing, and then various other places where they did, rested part of a field and grazed another part and all sorts of. But it was just all random nonsense. I just couldn't make sense of it at all. No. I'm at a meeting. Can I speak to you later? I've got the stuff from the vets here. Sorry, interruption.
The other thing I was thinking, Judith, is I don't suppose you can access fish waste from anyone locally. If there's any industrial producers of.
Oh, hey, there is a fish farm up the road.
Yeah, because although it obviously takes time and everything else, you can ferment that with sugar, and again, yeah, it takes 6 months at least, but you can derive some amino acids from that you can use to substitute the lacking nitrogen.
So I should have done that last back end rather than now.
That's true.
Yeah. Can you do like a fish GLF or something? Or is that what you're talking about?
That's a KNF one, I think, isn't it, Adam?
I'm talking about the fish amino acids from Korean natural farming, or Cho Global Natural Farming. I think young Sancho in Jadam does do something like a JLF with the fish too. But I've never done that, and it sounds very smelly. But that doesn't mean it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And it's going to be cheaper because you don't have to buy the sugar.
Have you completed an FAA?
Have I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you find
3 years old?
Oh, really? Because we've got one, and well, it should be ready in February. But were you pleased with it? Did it make much of a difference, do you think, with anything, or did you not manage to trial it on anything?
Yeah. Yeah, it worked for sure.
Okay.
It regreened yellowing cuttings and stuff like that. Yeah, really rapidly.
Cool.
I started using it after about 10 months, and then it went to about 3 years. I made about 40 litres of it. But obviously, I'm not running the farm.
Yeah. Cool. No, that's interesting to know, because we were just hoping to do some experiments with that, but we need to start making another one, I think, as soon as possible. But
the other thing you can do is blend. If you're on a small scale, you can blend the fish, and then you have a choice. Then you don't have to use sugar. You could use molasses, like a liquid molasses, or any kind of sugar you can find.
Yeah.
And then you can add lactobacillus to that ferment, and then you can pop a little, what do you call it? Like a airlock for fermenting beer and stuff in that. And the blending of it and the adding lactobacillus, and if you can keep it about 21 degrees somewhere, then that's going to speed it up a lot.
Okay.
But obviously, blending loads of fish comes with its own issues. Fish is pretty hardcore, and it's broken 2 blenders in this place. So now I just opt for using sugar crystals.
Yeah.
But speaking of other ways, I've been running the mineralization tank.
Yeah. How's what
so
your
I
thoughts?
started on the 12th of January, and 24 hours after setup, I recorded the EC at 0.5 EC, 250 ppm total dissolved solids. And that was at 6.9 degrees centigrade. And then 13 days after commencing the experiment, the EC was 1.1, so a significant increase in the EC, and then 550 ppm total dissolved solids. And when I took that reading, it was 10 to 12 degrees C, and it was 9 to 10 milligrams of dissolved oxygen per litre of water. And yeah, so it's not optimal conditions for lactobacillus. And I've been looking for our Ingoldian fungi friends, but I can't find them in there. So they've probably been out-competed in this case. But yeah, we're arriving after 13 days at usable levels of nutrients for plants, definitely functional. Now, I don't know what those nutrients are yet because we haven't done the lab test. I imagine there's a lot of potassium in there.
What did you put in it in terms of organic
matter? I put 3.5 kilograms of good compost. I put 1 kilogram of really fine wood chip fines from our green waste site here. That's just kind of mixed landscape chips, which is probably mainly, well, it's just mixed trees. Nothing too aromatic, nothing too like Leylandia or anything like that.
Yeah,
probably mostly pine, stuff like that. And then there was 1 kilogram of hemp cake, which is the after they press the oil out of the hemp seed, the stuff that's left over. So it's in a 200-liter brew. So there's not a lot of stuff in there, and there's a lot of nutrients being mineralized. So it's promising.
Yeah. And so is it the lactic acid bacteria that's mineralizing?
When I look in there now, I put in a litre of lactobacillus inoculant from an old kefir culture that had been over fermented, containing bifidobacterium, lactobacillus acidophilus, lactobacillus plantarum, lactobacillus casei, lactobacillus rhamnosus, and I can't see any lactobacillus. I can't see any Ingoldian fungi, but I can see a huge amount of aggregation from kind of like coccus, like bacteria, streptococcus, And there's a huge amount of flagellates in there. They seem to be the dominant guys. And there's a lot less already after 13 days. There's a lot less visible organic particles, which is interesting because I wasn't expecting it to work that fast. And it's not ideal conditions. There are 2 little water heaters in there set to 21 degrees C, but they're not hitting that. It's about 10 to 12 degrees C. So yeah, the aquaponics guys are right. This mineralization thing does work, and it seems to work pretty fast.
This is actually a very interesting experiment, and it's worth keeping tab on what Adam's doing there, because like we know for a fact that aquatic systems actually give you the fastest decomposition rates, right? So this is like the most ideal conditions, because he's keeping it aerobic. So it's like a fast moving river, fast moving water, basically constantly aerated, right? And so it's not standing water.
Bubbling air through it.
Say again, please.
You're bubbling air through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a cone tank, in a cone bottom tank, with the air coming in from the bottom of the cone with no diffuser, just a straight airstream.
We're using a strong pump. It's a 275 liters per minute of oxygen of air, basically pump. So it's like an aquarium pump of a very high output. You can get them on Amazon and eBay for about 150 quid. And so the thing is that the idea is that peat, for instance, is created in bogs where it doesn't flow, and that's why they're free of nutrients, because everything gets cast off. But here, things are being captured because it's aerobic. So that's why it's interesting.
It was interesting, obviously all that's interesting, but you mentioned pumps and litre per minute of air. Roughly, are you talking kind of 0.8 to 1 litre of air per litre of water, roughly? Because the reason I'm asking, we're just getting a 900 litre tank, and I was thinking we'd need about 800 litres of air a minute going through that.
How big of a tank did you say you're getting?
900 litres.
I think the maximum we've done, we've used 2 pumps in a IBC tank, because obviously we wanted to come from both sides because we didn't have a big cone tank. So we used 2 pumps, and that was enough. We were
actually the 2 pumps didn't raise the dissolved oxygen any higher than 1 pump.
There you go.
So the 1 pump was fine for 900 liters.
And how big was that pump? Sorry,
it's the same pump. What is it, Daniel?
It's a Haley ACO 600. I can send you the link if I find it.
The trouble is with the IBC container, if it is an IBC container you're talking about, you are right.
No, I was going to do we just use cone tanks, 60-degree cone tanks.
Oh, that's great then. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, you're grand then.
Because our trials have been just based on a 100 litre one with like an 80 litre per minute pump, but then obviously we need to step it up a bit. So again, I don't know. I think cone tanks are the way forward. Really, I know they're a bit more expensive and stuff, but I think the benefits there, isn't it? Especially you can do stuff like you're doing in the off season.
Yeah, for sure. And while it's cold as well, it's worth saying that the water has more of an ability to hold dissolved oxygen.
Yeah,
when it's hotter, like it loses the oxygen much faster. But the pumps we tested the IBC and the cone tank in summer with that pump, and it was still running at the desired dissolved oxygen levels.
And when you're making a compost tea, obviously you've got more things using up oxygen then, I suppose. It's still plenty of oxygen.
Yeah, it's still running 9 to 10 milligrams per litre, which is more than enough.
Cool.
I also kicked it off, I forgot to say, I kicked it off with a bit of that fermented root extract I've been talking about. Just 200 ml to kick it off. And then 10 ml of salmon oil emulsified with 10 ml of organic castile soap. And before I put all of that in, I put 1 tablespoon of potassium humate. It's probably not the best humate, but we got it for free.
Might as well use it.
And that's just to try and complex the chlorine before we start the process. So I bubbled that potassium humate in the brew for an hour, just thoroughly mix it through before adding the compost and everything else.
Because they say you should do that with humics as well. That'll do the same thing, will it? Complex chloramines and chlorines and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. You obviously get a bit of that, like if you've got old compost, but my concern is when you dump that compost in, it hits water with the chlorine in. To be fair, in our situation, the chlorine doesn't seem to be a massive issue. We're still getting good numbers, and we've always been using chlorinated water. We don't always use potassium humate in it. So really, obviously it depends on your zone, but you're both in Scotland, so I imagine the water's probably going to be cleaner and with less chloride in it. Chlorine, sorry.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's worth microscoping all the time just to make sure. But
we've got a private water supply from the farm that runs the yard, so I can either I can use public water supply or our other water supply for most of the time. I've got a choice, so I probably would use the farm supply if I was doing stuff.
Yeah, and if you've got an old woodland on your land, you could just steal some of that soil, and you could potentially extract humics from that just in water.
Judith, how many hands do you have to help? Can you sort of, can you actually get somebody, if you have, issues with mobility, have you got other people to help you with these experiments?
I can, my son sometimes, but he's just that busy on the farm. I do struggle. And my mobility since Christmas has not been brilliant. So I've been a bit frustrated, but last year I managed, and I wanted to build a Johnson Sioux in May, and I still haven't got it done because I can't get anybody to help me. And Duncan is promising me now that he'll do it, but God knows when.
I'll have to come for a holiday in Scotland then.
Eh?
I'll have to come for a holiday over at your place and camp out and build you some Johnson Sioux.
Well, when you said, how many do you want? Because initially I said I wanted to build one last May, which was fair enough that we could have used this spring. And now he's saying, how many do you want? And I'm saying, well, actually, maybe 10.
That's more like it, for sure.
But yeah, so I even need help to gather the stuff up. Although we do have fallen trees, and if we can get a wood chipper in, to instead of burning the branches, we can use a wood chipper. I think I could get a fair amount for quite a lot anyway. So that would be a big job. But I need to get somebody to do it, and I end up paying everybody. But I've got to do it. I think once Duncan sees it working and sees it done, he'll realise. But he's just that busy running around looking after cows and sheep meantime. So, and Tom's, my husband, although, we were watching David Attenborough the other night, and he was talking about rhizobial fungi and trees communicating and all that kind of stuff. And I was saying stuff, and Tom was going, aye, right. And then David Attenborough actually said it afterwards. And I think he's beginning to realise that there is real science out there behind what I'm trying to tell him. But he's a 60-something-year-old guy that just doesn't want to learn anything new and do anything different. So
he needs to see it.
Eh?
He needs to see it.
Yeah. But he's got a problem with that, because even if he does see it, he thinks that I'm trying to tell him that he's a bad farmer. And that he's wasted his last 40 years farming the way he has, which is another challenge for the agricultural industry, because if we try and change people into this new system, their current processes and systems of production is part of their identity. So
yeah, but
you've got to change, they've got to change, you're almost telling them that they've wasted and they've done it wrong and they're poor farmers and that they're not good enough.
Yeah, but they were only doing what they were told.
Pardon?
They were only doing what they were told and what the science was in inverted commas said at the time. It's not their fault.
No, absolutely. And they're only, I mean, they were coerced and bribed into doing what they did because the scientists were telling them that it was the soil chemistry and soil physics that was the key to their yield and therefore their profit. But what was completely omitted was the fact that it's the soil biology that does the soil chemistry and it's the soil biology that does soil physics. But we've kind of omitted that in order for the chemical industry to make the profits they made over the last 50 or 60 years. So it's not farmers' fault, but I think this is a key problem in the industry, and the key problem, if people are willing to change and have that mindset change and realize that there is huge value and, not just for themselves, but for the environment and the world and climate change and wildlife and everything, which I sincerely believe there is. But at the same time, they've got this thing in the back of their head that's saying, so you're telling me I've done it wrong all these years and I'm useless. And that's really dangerous. I think that, and that's kind of where my husband's stuck. Unfortunately, I do try and tell, because he's a bloody good farmer. He's really good with his livestock, and he knows what he's doing, and he knows how to use the fertilizers he was using, but they've done a lot of damage. But
just remember, Judith, the Unium Bioscience make a humic acid product in the UK. I've never used it, but they're really open. They're really open to communication if you want to talk to them. Unium, like with an M, not union, but Unium.
Bioscience.
Bioscience.
We were involved last year in some stuff. It was Ava Fertilizer. We did a thing through AHDB. It was a group of us trying some humics with fertilizer. Obviously we couldn't because we're organic, but they've got a product called Nurture N, which is something you can mix with. Admittedly, it's liquid nitrogen,
right.
but that does help. Their website's quite interesting.
And did the guys who tried it, did it work, and will they be using it again? Well,
I mean, the crazy thing was that most of the group were just like, "Oh, I can't be bothered." 2 guys did it, and it was a pretty difficult trial to see. I mean, SAC were involved, and who were the other people that are doing sort of head counts and sort of yield and stuff like that. But I don't think it was a resounding success, but we were too late on it as well. It was all a bit rushed and a bit late in the season, so I don't think it was necessarily a remotely fair trial. Yeah. But it was, you've got to try these things. We put some stuff on called N60, which was the only organic one that we could use, but again, I didn't see much difference. But that was just, we didn't do any yield mapping or anything. Our combine's too old for yield mapping, and we didn't put anything over weighbridges. From the trial plots, it was all just combined in fields. So, but no, it might be worth just looking there. I don't know.
I'll bet you there's plenty of folk looking at doing these kind of things more seriously this year.
Yeah, but I mean, I was just amazed by the sort of response of the group. Well, how limited the number of people were even wanting to reduce their fertilizer by 10-15%.
Yeah.
Which is but
there'll be a big difference in 12 months though, given what's happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think as long as the current equations or practices or systems are almost nearly just about working, I think we've got into a mindset where change is a dangerous thing and it's a risky thing, and people are actually very reluctant to do that because their profit margins are pretty slim and they want to squeeze as much out as they can, you know, from the system that they're familiar with.
Yeah.
And
because that's the thing, the margins are really slim, but when you look at the excuse me, the potential, the cost of your fertilizer in that margin calculation, if you take the fertilizer cost out, then your margins become a lot healthier, and it's just replacing that fertilizer sort of benefit with biologicals, which is a lot cheaper to do.
And the idea is basically to say that, you know, you've got a fertilizer factory down in the roots. So instead of basically saying that you're replacing fertilizers with biology, you're actually creating your own fertilizer factory. And that's basically it's like you're not changing your systems. You're just basically moving the factory from abroad to basically in your soil.
That's a really good way of expressing it, Daniel. I think that would help people understand some of it.
Hopefully.
Sure.
Yeah.
The thing what you said about sort of, you know, and also what you Phil said about sort of, you know, people not being bothered with 10-15% change, is that, you know, I drive a van and the prices of the diesel, you know, change all the time. As long as I have, you know, enough cash flow, I don't look at it. And I think this is the thing, right? And so the incentive that we're trying to build has to be, you know, like very, very visible as an opportunity. And so this is why I'm, you know, I can come across sounding arrogant when I say that I really want a system that works from year one, because that's going to be apparent, right? People will see that they simply change from chemicals to biological in year one, and that's just one benefit, right? The second benefit is if somebody's not organic, they can now choose to get organic certification. And organic margins are quite high, and in 3 years' time, they're going to be getting the higher margins, the ones who take it on early, right? So that's number two. And now there's these 4 competing carbon codes, and one of them, obviously, with Glenn Mitchell, is tied to the soil food web, right? So the thing is, you know, once they start looking at it from the perspective that the conservative prediction of what they'll be getting is that they will be storing 4 to 5 tons a hectare and getting 50 quid for each ton of carbon dioxide stored, right? And this is conservative, and we're aiming for 30 tons. So the thing is, you know, like when you start plugging in the numbers of 50 quid times 30,
makes a difference,
right?
It's huge.
And pastures should be able to accommodate that much quicker than arable, which I'm aiming for. And you've got the power of animals actually bringing in more carbon into the system and more nutrients into the system, just cycling it up. So this is basically, you know, a very, very simple economical equation. It has to basically hit. Like this is not something that you just ignore because, you know, prices change and 10-15% or whatever, it's going to change next year. It has to be a step change.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of my thing when I was a group facilitator for farmers and stuff was, you know, I tried to say to them that the equations of what we do have changed because, you know, I was at uni and finished uni in 1985, and your lamb prices were X, your beef prices were, you know, what they were, and your inputs, you know, food, fuel, fertilizer, labor, and, you know, sort of construction, concrete, whatever, were at a certain level. But I mean, what we get for our products, our produce, I mean, and it's the same for arable or dairy or pigs or whatever, but what we get for our produce in comparison to the increase in price and all these other inputs has completely wrecked those equations that we used to work to. And we therefore have to change something.
And this is another way to approach those farmers who have been farming for 40 years, thinking that they're doing a good job. They are doing a good job. How they were taught, and it's not their fault that basically that the market changed. The market just keeps squeezing more money out of you.
Yep. Yeah. But if we can help you, Daniel, to come up with some system, sort of program where we can show that it works in half of a field or a bit of a field somewhere in year one, and then grow that year on year, that's what's going to work. I don't think any one farmer is actually going to be able to transfer a whole farm unless it's something they've already done. If somebody's done it on one farm and they've got all that experience, then they may feel that they can take on a new farm next door or whatever.
Well, it's the same. It's the same with us. I wouldn't be able to approach a farmer and say I'm going to offer you transforming a whole farm if I've never had the experience of transforming a whole farm. Like we need to take this farm here. Okay, we've done half a hectare. Now we're doing 5 hectares. This year we want to do the next 30 hectares, right? And the whole farm is 120 hectares. And each time basically we're learning new things, and until we get to the point where there's at least one organization with enough experience under its belt to want to take over a whole farm and know what they're doing.
Yep. But I mean, we need, as a country, we're going to need 10 times the number of, or 100 times the number of Daniels and Glenn Mitchells and whoever else. We're going to need hundreds.
Adams.
Adams, absolutely. Yeah, but I mean, we're going to need hundreds of these people.
True.
And I tell you, if I was fit, I'd be bloody doing it, but I just can't do it.
This is why we also keep in touch with everybody doing, Soul Food Web courses in the UK.
Yeah.
And
and are there hugely increased numbers doing it?
There's a few people, yeah. There's on just on my list to sort of to keep in touch on, because we have meetings like this on Thursdays, but we don't record that. It's just our internal stuff. And there's 21 people on it.
Right.
So, there's a few of us. There's not a massive amount, but, we just try to keep in touch with everybody who wants to keep in touch. And so, but it's going to be other people. It's going to be regenerative agronomists, that we need more of. We need agronomists to start, retraining in these things. And they are, Hutchinson's even has invested in one agronomist, who's doing just regenerative, and basically having a foot in the door that way. And when the time comes, they'll probably retrain the rest if they see the potential in it. But it's going to, it really has to be a step change. Somebody has to at some point just go in and just demonstrate it on a number of farms across the country, that they know what they're doing. Otherwise, I don't see it. Otherwise, basically, it's just going to be stumbling as it has been.
And yeah, we need to have that community and that communication between as many people as possible who are trying it out and learn from one another to establish what we believe works and what we believe doesn't, and try and learn why it works and why it doesn't. Because if we're all just doing it in our own little silos, it's going to take decades.
Yep.
And frankly, we don't think we've got decades.
Probably not. Anyway, we've gone over time because it's been fun chatting about these things.
Yeah, well, no, that's great. Thank you. I'll go and get tea now.
Adam?
Judith, in the chat box, I don't know if you saw, but there's a link to the Union Bioscience website and the bioag.eu. I think maybe if you contact, email, or ring the Bioag EU and just talk to them about humic acid, you're probably going to get good tidbits and you can decide whether it's worth going forward.
Yeah, I can ask. There's no harm in asking, is there?
That's it. And even Dr. Robert Faust himself, who lives in Oregon, apparently he's really open to answering emails. And
right. Yeah.
So if you need to know more, he's the guy. He's put the time in.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's brilliant. Thank you both so much. And Phil.
No worries.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Good to chat.
See you guys next
Cheers,
week.
guys.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.